an alternative.
We who believe in freedom and not rest. Let me talking to ya. We who believe in freedom and not rest until it comes. Then struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. How about no man's word? We believe in freedom and not rest. Hear me talking to you. We believe in freedom and not rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. We believe in freedom and not rest. Oh, we believe in freedom and not rest until it
Can you hear me? Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. I guess we can go ahead and get started. Professor Blackmer, are all the speakers here?
We might still be waiting for a couple more. We have Professor Simmons and Lloyd Simpson on the call. I see Council Member Brown is on the call as well. I think we might still be just waiting for Reverend Watson, who I anticipate joining us any moment.
Awesome. So should I hold off on my intro for a few seconds?
Let's go ahead and get started. We can work Reverend Watson into the conversation as soon as she gets in.
Awesome, sounds good. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Black Power to Black Lives Matter in Detroit, an intergenerational conversation on the legacies of the Black Power movement in Detroit and its lessons for the Black Lives Matter movement today. My name is Ashley Ray. I'm a graduate assistant in the Department of Africology and African American Studies, and I'll be the moderator for this evening. Black Power to Black Lives Matter is an extension to the Africology and African American Studies Department's larger Black History Month speaker series, where we'll be hosting conversations centered around education, liberation, activism, and the arts with community leaders. Our next event, entitled Education for Liberation in Detroit, takes place Thursday, February 17th at 6 p.m. and will be hosted by my colleague, Jonathan Blake. And closing out the series will be the Music and Movement in Detroit, which takes place Thursday, February 24th at 6 p.m. and is hosted by myself. For more information on the speaker series and to register for specific events, please visit our department website at emish.edu/AAAS. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-sponsor for this event, the EMU NAACP. We would also like to thank EMU Kings of Color and the EMU chapter of Young Democratic Socialists of America for their support. Your contributions are greatly appreciated. We will begin the event with a roundtable discussion with our esteemed panelists, and we'll end with a question and answer session. We ask that everyone submit their questions to the chat box located at the bottom of your screen and remain on mute unless you are called upon. Now to introduce our panelists. I will start with Professor Charles Simmons. Professor Charles Simmons is a lifelong activist and emeritus professor of media and social justice at Marygrove College. He also formerly taught in the journalism and law departments at Howard and Eastern Michigan universities. Professor Simmons was a member of the radical Black youth organization, UHURU, founded in Detroit in 1963, which later evolved into the League of Revolutionary Black Workers in 1969, alongside General Baker, Luke Tripp, and John Watson. In 1964, he traveled to Cuba with a group of students in defiance of the State Department travel ban, where he met with revolutionary leaders, including Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Abdul Rahman Muhammad Babu, and Robert and Mabel Williams. Professor Simmons established the Hush House, Black World Museum and Leadership Training Institute for Human Rights, both in Detroit and Dakar, Senegal, alongside his wife, Reverend Sandra Simmons, in 2000. Welcome, Professor Simmons. Next up, we have Mr. Lloyd Simpson, who is a PhD student in the Department of History at the University of Michigan and a 2021 graduate of Wayne State University, where he majored in African American Studies with a minor in history. His research focus includes Black Marxism, labor history, and the Black freedom struggle. He is specifically interested in understanding the function of police as an extension of state power. Mr. Simpson is also a member of Detroit Will Breathe, a radical direct action organization that grew out of the mass movement that took form in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Welcome, Mr. Simpson. And next up, we have Ms. Nicole Brown, who serves as the Mayor Pro Tem of the city of Ypsilanti. She is also a supervisor at Starfish Family Services, where she manages several programs, including wraparound case management and supports coordination. Ms. Brown is both an alumnus and graduate student of Eastern Michigan University and has always been heavily involved on campus as well as in the greater Ypsilanti community as both a leader and mentor. She served as the chair of the Black Lives Matter Task Force for the city of Ypsilanti and is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Ann Arbor Alumni Chapter. Welcome, Ms. Brown. Is Reverend Watson here? I don't see Reverend Watson. I can go ahead and introduce her in the event that she does join us a little bit later. Reverend JoAnn Watson is a native Detroiter activist and former Detroit City Council member. Reverend Watson had numerous influential positions within the city of Detroit throughout her career, including being the Detroit chapter's NAACP director, YWCA director, YWCA of the USA Assistant Executive Director, and public liaison for Congressman John Conyers, just to name a few. Reverend Watson was recognized by The Nation magazine in 2009 as the most valuable local elected official in the USA. She has also served as the chair of the Detroit chapter of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, also known as NCOBRA, and is a longtime member of NCOBRA's national board. Currently, Reverend Watson is the associate pastor of Westside Unity Church, and you can listen to her radio show, Wake Up Detroit, Saturdays from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. on iHeartRadio. All right. So I guess I'll start off with the first question. And this one is going to be directed to Professor Simmons. Can you share about getting involved with the movement as a college student? We would also like to hear about the formation of Uhuru and your experiences with challenging moderate organizations.
Again, it's not here.
Mr. Simmons, your audio is breaking up a little bit. So I think that maybe if you cut your video, your audio will come through a little better.
Video. Okay. Is that any better?
That's much better.
I did. Okay. I was saying I got involved in the movement as a child in the 1940s because my grandparents, particularly my grandmother, Annie Wright, who was born in 1891, she taught Negro history in the church at King Solomon Baptist Church. How's my audio now? How's audio?
Excellent.
Okay. And so she taught me to recite poetry in the community. Now, this was poetry about Jim Crow, going all the way back to abolition and forward to the time, at that time, we were in World War II. And so I was talking about the racism within the military. Now, years later, when I got out of high school, I joined the Air Force. This was 1959. I was 17 years old. And I was stationed in Mississippi for a year. Now, this was only 4 or 5 years after the Emmett Till murder and lynching. And so I was there when the sit-in started in 1960 or 61. And so that really took my interest away from the military into, because I didn't know, I thought that the military purpose was to simply defend the country. I didn't know anything about imperialism or capitalism and the oppression that was taking place around the world. I had no idea about that. But I was knowledgeable about civil rights movement, the Jim Crow, we call it. It's very clear that we were, as a people, we were being horribly oppressed, and as workers, because my grandfather was an activist in the trade union movement. He was in the UAW, but he was also a strong supporter of A. Philip Randolph and the Pullman porters and maids. While I was in the Air Force, when I discovered that the United States was going to invade, we were planning to invade Cuba and actually to bomb Cuba. This was before the Bay of Pigs invasion. And that we were we were planning in secret to go into Vietnam. Now, this was before the official Vietnam War started. They were trying to recruit young GIs like myself to go to Vietnam, saying that it was a civilian action, a police action. We were going to promote peace and justice, abroad. And so we young people didn't know what they were talking about, but the more I discovered about what the United States role was, I opposed it primarily because I thought the United States was being a bully, invading and beating up little countries. Am I still in the system? I can't see my face, anything. Hello?
Yes, you're still here.
Okay. All right. So I opposed the war in Vietnam, and I opposed the Cuban, the U.S. invasion of Cuba. Just in conversation with other GIs, I hadn't stated it officially to the authorities, but I was developing that idea. And so one of the GIs went back and told the commander what I said. And so they called me in and asked me to explain, and asked me what my position was. Did I say I refused to fight in the military? And so I had been instructed by the older guys never to say I refused, because I would go straight to jail. But I said I didn't like it. I was opposed to it. And so at that moment, the military position was they wanted everything to be a secret. And so anybody who raised any type of opposition, verbally or otherwise, they just got rid of us right away. And so I was discharged. I'd been in over 3 years, so I was discharged honorably. They just wanted to get us out of there. So I immediately came back to Detroit, and that's when I joined. Within a couple of months, I started at Wayne State University and met up with all the, there was about a dozen of us, activist-oriented students, and we founded Uhuru. We took the name from the organization in Kenya, which was fighting against British imperialism at the time. That was their cry. It was their battle cry, freedom. So we adopted that, and we took on many of the same issues that Black Lives Matter is dealing with today. Police brutality was number one. We're also dealing with unemployment, employment discrimination in Detroit. At that time, segregation was quite common. It was unofficial, but it was real. You couldn't go downtown to Hudson's, or women couldn't try on a hat, and where white women had to try on clothes. And we were the last hired. We were not employed in the various supermarkets in the city. Retail stores didn't hire Black folks, and so it was general, with the exception of the auto industry and the steel industry, heavy industry. We were allowed to work in mass, but in the worst, lowest paying, the most dangerous positions. And but they paid a lot of money compared to where we came from, where our parents came from. Basically, many of them were sharecroppers or poor farmers in the South. And say in the South was a Confederate state, Confederate region. And that hasn't changed that much. But we've started reading about liberation movements around the world. We read about the abolitionist struggles, people like Frederick Douglass, Maida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, Denmark Vesey, John Brown, all the people who took on the system. And one of the differences that we had with the older people who were in the civil rights struggle was that we believed that it was necessary to change the entire system in the United States. It wasn't enough. The desegregation was not enough. And so we read the revolutionary literature and people. And so we got invited to go to Cuba in '64 to challenge the State Department travel ban. It was illegal to go to Cuba without permission from the State Department. And there were, in fact, lawsuits pending at the same time for other people who had wanted to go or who had been. Our interest, it was 4 of us were Black youth. Our interest was, we had heard that racism was being eliminated or wiped out in Cuba as a result of the revolution. So we wanted to find out about the racism. We knew that there were Black folks in exile in Cuba, Robert Williams and Mabel Williams' family, who had fought against the Klan in North Carolina. We wanted to see the Williams and Che Guevara and the various people who were involved in the liberation movements all around the world. And so we had a dual mission as in Uhuru. We were struggling for justice in the United States, and also we joined hands with the people who were involved in the struggle against injustice around the world. And so that organization evolved over the next 5 years. We started in '63. By the end of the '60s, it had become the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. And now all of us had connections with the auto industry. Our parents, our siblings, our uncles and aunts worked in the factories. And so we worked in the factories too. At that time, it was easy to get a job working in a factory. Factories were plentiful and the pay was good. So many of the students, the male students, would work a semester in the factory and have enough money to go to school, and then we quit and get a job and go to school. And then we drop out of school for a semester and go to work in the factory. So we understood the system of industrial labor and the oppression, the brutal oppression that people experienced in the auto industry. I mean, the upside was we made much money compared to other working class people, but at the same time, it was very dangerous and unhealthy and very grueling. So we supported the trade unions, UAW, but we found that the trade union also discriminated and did not fight put up a good fight for working people. They, the leadership had become sweethearts with the corporation. And so we had to fight against both the company and the union. And that's what we did when in the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. I'm going to stop there. So
that you honestly answered my next question too, which is going to be about the evolution of the Black Power movement in Detroit. That was such an extensive history. You touched on so many gems. I'm going to come back to you in a second, Professor Simmons. I'm going to now direct my next question to Mr. Simpson. Do you want me to call you Mr. Simpson or Lloyd?
Please call me Lloyd. Don't call me Mr. Simpson. I'm not ready for that.
Okay. Your question is, how did you first become active in the Black Lives Matter movement? And how has your study of the Black Power movement influenced your organizing work today?
So how I became involved dates back to 2014 and the non-indictment of Darren Wilson in the police murder of Michael Brown in Oakland, California, actually. And so when that went down, Oakland was one of the cities where there was an uprising. And that was my first introduction to radical politics, to a movement against police power and police brutality. And I would carry that experience home to Detroit, where I'm from. In 2016, I came back here and would ultimately be involved in organization around the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery by vigilantes, and our own Hakeem Littleton here in Detroit in July of 2020. And so would you like me just to carry on, or? Okay. And so yes, going back to 2020, I became involved with an organization, Detroit Will Breathe, that opposes police brutality and systemic racism in Detroit and everywhere. And so that was my introduction into radical politics, and it transformed my life completely. And, you know, I learned a great deal about the role of the state, police power, and capitalism, racial capitalism, as it oppresses working class Black people. And so in my organizing work and moving throughout the city of Detroit amongst organizing circles and the left in Detroit, I came to understand the true role of the police, which is to uphold the dictates of capitalism, policing along the lines of race and class, and the imperatives of neoliberalism. So that is how I came to this work.
Did you study the organizing tactics of the Black Power movement, and has that influenced how you organize today?
Absolutely. And so, I mean, so much can be learned from the history of Black Power, and specifically the work of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I really appreciate Mr. Simmons sharing his history of organizing work, because that is so relevant to everything that we are doing today. Because not only do we learn from the work of those who came before us, but we also can be critical of the work that came before us, and then ultimately critical of ourselves. And Detroit arguably is the vanguard of the Black liberation struggle historically, and I would argue in the contemporary moment, right? And so if we think about the civil rights struggle and Black power and the role of young people, we have to understand that those are two distinct movements, but they're intertwined as a part of the broader Black freedom struggle. And what is Black power about? It's about independent Black political action. It's about self-determination. It's about opposition to racial capitalism. In many cases, it's about nationalism. And in its truest sense, it's about internationalism. And so when we think of Black power, we think of Robert Williams, as Mr. Simmons mentioned. We also think of Malcolm X. We think of Gloria Richardson in the Cambridge movement. We think of Fannie Lou Hamer in the South, right? And so as we remember how Black power came into being as a political force, we often think of Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, in 1966 in Greenwood, Mississippi. But the truth is that the concept of Black power is much older than this. Black communists, Harry Haywood, Harold Cruz, Richard Wright, Claudia Jones, the Black Belt thesis, that is where I think the concept of Black self-determination originates. And so I think that's important to consider. And how we understand our organizing today is that we know that American capitalism was built off of the theft of indigenous lands, theft of Black labor under slavery, and theft of Black labor under industrial capitalism and neoliberal capitalism, right? And so, and the police are an essential part of that project, right? And so Black Lives Matter emerged in the context of police brutality. And I would say that all major social movements in the past century regarding Black folks, particularly, the catalyst has been police brutality, right? And so police brutality spawned Black Lives Matter. Police brutality spawned Black power. If you think about police repression in the South, if you think about the Black Panthers, the Black Panther Party of Self-Defense, that's often left off. You know, we think about the Black Panther parties, and we don't think about how they got started, which was defending Black residents of Oakland against police brutality and checking police power. And that's what we do in Detroit Will Breathe.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. My next question is going to go to Miss Nicole Brown. We'll pin you here, and then I will. Oh, I don't see her anymore. She's still here. Oh, there she is. Okay, there you go. Hi. So, Nicole, can you talk a bit about your experience in the political realm from the beginning until now, and the roles that elected officials play in the ongoing struggles for Black liberation?
Okay. So, wow, I've heard so much so far from the first two speakers. I feel like, oh, I have to follow them. I don't want to do that, but here we go. So first of all, I never saw myself in politics. When I came to Eastern, I was a social work student, a communications major, and I wanted to work in community. That's what I knew. I wanted to work with people. And I worked alongside a lot of young folks in my time through internships and just being involved in the community. And the South side of Ypsilanti in particular is a predominantly Black community, historically Black community, who has experienced the gamut of things that you could think of in predominantly spaces where Black people live, right? And breathe. So I was working with young Black individuals in the community, finding, safe spaces, safe places for them to be able to congregate and to just be, right? To be themselves, and to have their own unique lived experiences when there are not many, particularly in the 4 square miles of Ypsilanti City, that were available for those young folks. And so in doing that, I got to meet and greet and work with individuals in the community who were elders and ended up being mentors to me, who were around for some of the movements even that Professor Simmons has talked about, and some of the things that moved us in the directions that we have been as far as the Black liberation movement. And so in that, one of them being our current County Commissioner, Ricky Jefferson, who was a current council member at that time, asked me if I'd be interested in running for city council. He had the vision and understanding about how young people influence movements and how young people create change. And he felt like as he was moving out of his seat that he wanted to see someone younger take the seat, as well as someone representative of that community who was familiar there. And so that is how I ended up running for council. Had no idea that I would win or ever be in politics. Again, that was not ever my intention. I ran, I'm here, so I won, and I was shocked, but I'm grateful after now being in my second term that I did step into this arena and that I've been doing this work. And so politically, what I've recognized in learning this as I go, to be honest with you, is that the work that I was put here to do and that I expect myself to do as far as empowering Black people in this movement is to really just create additional spaces, just like Ricky Jefferson and others created for me, to be at the table. This ward in particular that I represent, I'm currently Mayor Pro-Tem, which represents the entire city, but I am the Ward 1 representative again, which is predominantly Black and has been the forgotten ward, right? Where economic development, if it were not in the downtown corridor, is not usually thought of. Spaces for Black individuals, children, women to gather, our community spaces, not really poured into financially. And so I've utilized my role to be able to pour into community that way economically, to bring money into the community, to bring money to Black people, to bring opportunities for Black youth. And sometimes it has caused dissonance and it has caused issues because folks are asking, why am I talking about Black people? Well, that is who I'm here to serve. That is who I'm here to represent. That is my identity, right? And it doesn't mean that I'm not doing my job for everyone else, but my purpose here is to represent for those voices that go unheard a lot of the time. And so I work really hard to bring Black businesses to the community, to empower other Black individuals to get involved in politics, whether it be by sitting on boards and commissions or running for office themselves. And so I did chair the Black Lives Matter task force a few years ago that ended up transitioning into our police advisory commission to become a permanent body in the community so that we could have a closer look on when it comes to oversight and the impact that our police was having on their interactions with young people in the community in particular is what some of that came out of. And just really talking about issues that face people of color as they traverse the streets of Ypsilanti. And so I've continued in my 7 years going on my 8th to just do things of that nature, to just make sure that in every conversation that we're having, that I bring my identities to the table and I make sure that they're not lost, in the shuffle. We've been doing some archive digging and things of that nature. And I just found out some information about the first Black female city council person that I had never known who she was until this week. And her name is Maddie Dorsey. And I've just been reading about some of the work that she did and how hard it was for her to run and lose twice before actually obtaining the city council seat that she had, and how the things that she came against, being a Black woman in Ypsilanti, wanting to be a part of this political arena, and some of the things that she was fighting for then, I see coming to the table with me on council now, right? And that was in 1966 that she won that seat, and we're in 2022. And so when we talk about what is my role as a political young person and an elected official in Black liberation, it's just to continue the fight, to continue bringing issues to the table that face those who look like me, to keep creating opportunities for those who look like me, and to educate those around me that, politics is not what it's been made to seem like, this big cumbersome thing, right? That is carved out for those who that's their trajectory, and they walk this path, and it's laid out for them, and the word is escaping me, but like the baton is being passed to particular individuals who are meant to be in these spaces. I am trying to empower the folks who have never thought about it, but who have something to say, and also have ideas on how to move us forward, to come and shake the table, instead of doing it, in the way that it has been taught. And so I am a student always. And so I'm constantly learning, even within this role. And like I said, every day I'm learning new things about being an elected official and making decisions about what moves I make that make sense for all of us. But I think that as I even attend events like this, and I hear from like the two speakers before me, it gives me ideas of things that I should be thinking about and talking about with my colleagues, as well as the constituents that I serve, when they are, inquiring about what's next for our community and what can they do and what can I do to serve and support. So I hope I answered your question. But
You did, and then some, and it's much appreciated. Thank you. I saw that Reverend Watson came in not too long ago. Reverend Watson, hi. We went ahead and introduced you. I hope I got your bio correct. But we're really happy to have you. And I have a question for you. We would like to hear you talk a little bit about growing up during the civil rights movement in Detroit and the spirit of the movement in the city during that time.
Oh, thank you very much. I love everything that is being shared this evening. It's so exciting. And what better time than now during Black History Month? Many people need to be reminded that nobody gave us this month. It was deliberately selected by Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his vice president, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who was a founder of the Bethune-Cookman College and the National Council of Negro Women, 1926, Black History Week and now month. When you consider it was chosen because it's the birth month of the NAACP and also because it's the birth month of Frederick Douglass. It was his chosen birth month, the great Frederick Douglass. I was absolutely a child of the movement. I am 70 and was picked up by my grandparents to march in the June 63 march, when Dr. King was the keynote speaker, and the march led by Reverend Dr. C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father, a walk to freedom, which was the largest march up until that period, before the August march of that same year. And many people are not aware that the money that Dr. Franklin raised in the Detroit march, where Dr. King first said, "I have a dream," that money from Detroit helped to fund the resources that were used for the March on Washington in August 63. Dr. King considered Reverend Dr. C.L. Franklin one of his mentors. And he was a longtime board member of the SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I was a child of the movement. I've witnessed from my childhood activities of Malcolm X, who had an office on Linwood, where I went to high school, Central High School. I read The Message to the Black Man and How to Eat to Live. That's the reason I don't eat pork. Mosque number 1 was right, even though I'm a Methodist, mosque number 1 was right across from my high school. And we felt protected by the Nation of Islam. I was connected with the Shrine of the Black Madonna and went to the revolutionary series that were happening there all the time. I was mentored by Dr. Mario Bedelli, who was, and also Reverend Milton Henry. And Mario Bedelli back then was known as Richard Henry. His brother, Reverend Milton Henry, Gaidio Bedelli, were mentors and the founders of the Republic of New Africa, as well as the NCOBA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Reparations, Ray Jenkins was a mentor. I gave him the name Reparations Ray Jenkins when he called my radio show every morning, only talking about reparations. And then he appointed me and sent me to the United Nations World Conference Against Racism to represent Detroit and to be a part of that group that declared that the transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity and should always have been so. So I was the first woman director of the Detroit NAACP, which was the largest branch in the country. I was very active within COBRA, president of the local chapter, until I got elected to the Detroit City Council. I was elected to the Detroit City Council with all the political persons who were supposed to be the wisdom makers on politics, all saying I didn't have a snowball's chance in hell because I had never run for office before, was too Black, too left, reparations, still never make it. I won. I beat Gil Hill, who had been president of the council, who had 100% name recognition from starring in movies with Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop. And I was very blessed. The Lord put me in office, and people who didn't traditionally vote put me in office. I came into office and sponsored a series of progressive legislation to the degree that the Nation magazine called me the most successful local politician in America in 2009. One of my sponsored legislations was don't turn off the water for poor people and elders in Detroit. We own the water system, and you can't turn the water off. You can't live without water. I believe that young people should have access to jobs every summer. They should be hired by their own cities. So I set out to create 10,000 jobs every summer to hire young people. Created legislation called African Town. It said, but we have a Greek town, a Mexican town, all kind of towns in Detroit. There ought to be an epicenter for our people to own their own businesses and to keep the dollar going round and round and round so we can employ ourselves. I believe that Detroit's history is not really known and passed down enough to the younger generation. So people often don't even know there was a Paradise Valley, a Black Bottom, a Black business district where our people owned pharmacies and cleaners, and they owned restaurants and hotels. There were business districts. Most of that was because Blacks weren't allowed to patronize other businesses, so they created their own. Then the freeway, a racist system, and some people termed it Negro removal, what was then called so-called urban renewal, just absolutely wiped away many, many Black businesses in the city of Detroit with the construction of a freeway, with the promise that they would rebuild the businesses. Of course, that never happened. That did not happen. So a city that has 80 to 90% Blacks should have businesses owned by 80 to 90% Black. That is not the case in Detroit, as our good friend, Dr. Claude Anderson, has pointed out over and over again in Powernomics and Black labor, white wealth. I'm blessed that even after retirement, from the Detroit City Council, having served 10 years. I am still active on the national reparations agenda. I'm still active. I'm active with my faith. I'm a senior pastor at Westside Unity Church in Detroit. I am active on a number of boards that are transforming the lives of our people in this community. And I think back to my years at the University of Michigan, when we started the Black Action Movement and shut down the university and demanded 10% Black enrollment. And we demanded that there be a Rosa Parks, Dr. King, Cesar Chavez Scholarship Fund, which is still standing. We demanded that there be a significant goal to have young people of African descent represented among the students at the University of Michigan, which is publicly funded. It should be accessible to the public. And those kind of demands, I hope continue to resonate among the current students so that they know they didn't just show up in Ann Arbor. Somebody paved the way. Somebody fought a good fight for them to be there. So I'm going to stop right there and open to any questions and conversation on where we are now.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Reverend Watson. My mind is going a mile a minute right now, but what I will say is that after listening to you speak and then Miss Brown, Nicole, speak about your experiences with politics, it really debunks that narrative that you have to be some kind of political science junkie or it has to run in the family. You have to be super involved politically in order to get your foot through the door. And I just loved what you guys said about defying those expectations and seeing a need for people like you to represent people like you. And that is just so inspiring to me. But I will, my next question is going to go to both Reverend Watson and Professor Simmons. I wanted, can we get Professor Simmons pinned? I'll go ahead and ask the question while that's happening though. What lessons would you offer to students and today's organizers from your experience?
I think it's very important to study the history of struggles for justice through in the United States history, which is not taught in schools. I mean, we've got, you have to search far and wide to get materials. So it's important to study what happened in the United States and what happened in the Black diaspora around the world. How they have struggled, revolutions, reform movements, all types of struggle for justice. That's one thing, and it's continuous, a lifetime mission. We need to get involved more with the environmental/climate change movement. The planet Earth is ours, and we have to take care of it and fight for it. We need to think of ourselves as not only citizens of one country, but citizens of the world. And that all all life forms have to be protected in order to protect humanity. I think the King's pointing out three monsters that America has to deal with. Militarism is another one. Militarism in our foreign policy and militarism at home with police.
Oh, Professor Simmons, you may want to turn off your video again. Because you're breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Militarism, white supremacy, and capitalism is the three monsters that we had to deal with. That back in the 50s and 60s is still the challenge today. We need to link up with other organizations throughout the diaspora, throughout the Black world. To help each other in ways that we can. Changing foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy is a militaristic, anti-human policy. And so we have to fight to change foreign policies so that it'll benefit us so they don't spend all this money on the military, as well as decrease the oppression that's taking place and the exploitation that's taking place on the African continent and in the Caribbean and in South America and so on. I think it's important to elevate women, and young people have to be at the table, and men have to fight to make sure that the women are in leadership positions. I think that was a mistake that we did. We didn't fight for the women during the 60s. That was a big mistake. Not everybody, but too many of us did not. And we didn't fight to have young people at the table. The March on Detroit organized, we organized that in 63, 60, and then the March on Washington. Many of the activities that have gone down did not include young people at the table. And we know that young people are in the vanguard of the struggles for justice all over the world and have been. And so the older people have to support the youth in these struggles. I think it's important also that we work on our inter-organizational, our interpersonal, our inter-family relationships. We've got to rebuild and strengthen our families and strengthen these organizations. We treat each other too often as enemies when we disagree about something. And it's important to know that we're not each other's enemy because we don't agree on something. And we have to be compassionate with one another. And that's something that we have learned from the Black church, which has been which we don't have time to talk about, but the Black church has been a major pillar in our struggles for justice, and not only the struggle for justice, but the struggle for strong families and strong communities. So I'll stop there, but those are some of the things that are on my mind. And I want to say hello to my sister, Reverend JoAnn, who's still she was still my city councilwoman.
Bless your heart, my brother Charles Simmons, who I love and respect. I think organize, which was the great mantle of one of our great heroes, is something that we should always send out to our young people, our young adults, youth. Organize. You never stop organizing. You never stop teaching and educating and spreading truth. This year, I wrote a chapter in a new book about the life of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, who was one of my mentors. I love C.T. Vivian. He was like another father to me. And as I was writing it, I also threw in some information I knew about another mentor, Dr. Dorothy Irene Height, who was the leader of the National Council of Negro Women. When I mentioned in this book that she was one of the insiders who helped plan the March on Washington, the publisher sent me a note saying he couldn't find Dr. Height's name. I said, listen, I got it from her mouth to my ears. She was in the group. I had to actually send them information from her autobiography where it cited from her memoirs that she was one of only 7 in a room planning, an only woman, Dorothy Irene Height, planning that March on Washington. And it was Dr. Height who brought John Lewis into the meeting and brought his name up as a speaker. So we would never have heard John Lewis speaking in the 63 March on Washington had it not been for Dr. Dorothy. And Dr. Height's name has been left out of all these historical attributes that talk about the Big Six who planned the march. No, it wasn't the Big Six, it was the Big Seven. That's why we must always study. We must always study. We must know our work. We need to know that Dr. King said, I have a dream first in Detroit. We need to know that Malcolm X was a great friend and supported by Reverend Milton Henry, who was also one of the attorneys who supported and provided legal measures for Malcolm X in Detroit. We don't know our history as well as we should, and we don't pass along what needs to be passed along. There's some greatness in this city, in this state, and great persons of African descent whose names and whose deeds, whose legacies will be buried if we don't share the news, spread the news, organize, and make sure that people know that Rosa Parks, for example, not only was a person who stood up in Montgomery, Alabama, she stood up in Detroit. She attended reparations conventions in Detroit at what was then called Cobo Hall, sat right next to Queen Mother Moore on the front seat of that convention in Detroit. She spoke at the significant funeral of Robert Williams, who was the first president of the Republic of New Africa. Mother Rosa Parks was there. She was a revolutionary. She was left. She was progressive. She was more than somebody who wouldn't get up off the bus seat. She was a person who was committed to the liberation of African people. And we need to tell the whole story, the entire story of our people, and organizing and educating and making sure that we're armed with information and that we never stop using the opportunity to become lifelong learners. That is the message I would pass along to young people.
Thank you for that. You all said so much. The biggest thing to me is studying and making sure that you're paying attention to the right information. I guess my question would be, for us young people and students studying the civil rights movement, how do we go about finding the right information?
Am I on? I would start with this book by Herb Boyd about Detroit. He covers 300 years of Detroit history, which is a major research project that young people can follow up on. It's a good example of the research that young scholars can participate in. I think we need to study the, I had never heard of Black Power until we were deep into the movement. We didn't think of ourselves as under a particular label, because I was listening at some blues by Odetta the other day, and she was singing Lead Belly's song about Jim Crow blues. Well, the labels have changed, but the basic conditions of exploitation and oppression and injustice have not changed. And so we have to continue, as Sister JoAnn just pointed out, we continue to study. We have now in the various Afro studies departments, they have the reading list, because it's too much to give for me to give now. But there are reading lists of Black history, of labor history, of women's history. It's accessible right now. Now, on the other hand, there's the right wing is trying to ban books. And this has happened before. And when I started out in the 50s, it was very difficult to find the Black books. So don't take it for granted that we're going to always have these. And I don't trust, they're on their digital, some of them, but you don't know what's going to happen with the internet. So it's good to collect your own resources as well as have access to them in the libraries. But I would start with the Afro-Black Studies Department. Now, I want to comment, Sister JoAnn raised, she mentioned Robert Williams. We got to study the books by Rob and Mabel Williams. Negro Sons, for example, especially at this time, because people are attacking our people and our communities. We got to defend ourselves as individuals and as communities. And that's something we need to study. There are good examples. There's another book called We Will Shoot Back. Akinyele is the brother's name. But we need to know about the resistance that we have conducted from the beginning, since we first set foot on this continent. We've never stopped fighting. And the fighting has to be a lifetime activity. That's it, Umoja. We will shoot back. Thank you. And we need to look at the history of the Black church and the independent, particularly. I'm not saying that all Black church leaders are progressive, but many of them are, and we need to study them and how and the role of faith in our struggle is extremely important, because this is a long, winding road of injustice that we're dealing with. If you don't have faith, it's going to be very difficult for you to keep going. And I would say
That's right.
that faith has kept me going in this struggle. And that's another aspect. Read Reverend Jeremiah Wright's work. Listen to his speeches. His speeches are on YouTube.
That's
and
right.
Like that. Cornell. There's so many, but start with the Black Studies Department's reading list. That would be one major suggestion.
So
Another book.
Sorry.
Book. Go ahead.
Ms. Watson, you go ahead.
I just wanted to indicate that Should America Pay is a seminal book which addresses all of the angles of why so much is owed to people of African descent, because our people didn't just build up the South with unpaid labor. The whole nation benefited. This entire United States of America benefited from the transatlantic slave trade. The entire nation did it. And Should America Pay? I wrote a chapter of that book with Congressman Conyers, but it's filled with information and data about who else has received reparations in this country, and how the OBGYN profession, the medical profession, got started with special exercises being done on African women who were enslaved with no anesthesia on C-sections. That's outrageous. The insurance companies like Aetna, they got founded from profits on the slave trade. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States, and they got paid for by profits from the slave trade. Our people, the resources that were generated by Africans doubled the size of the United States. The persons who lost the Civil War received reparations to compensate them for their losses. Most people have no idea that the Confederates who lost the Civil War got paid. The Africans who worked from can't see in the morning to can't see at night never got anything but lynch mobs. So we need to be armed with history, with facts, and we need to be armed with the courage to stand up and fight. Anytime these terrorists are threatening Black colleges, that's a whisper away from threatening the lives of Black people. We need to recognize what state we're in and what time it is. Thank you.
So I would just make a few suggestions, a couple of them here. I've got The Light of Freedom by Charles Payne. You want to know how SNCC organized in the South? I think that's really important. Another thing is, if we want to talk about Black power, we want to talk about Concrete Demands, okay, by Rhonda Williams, if you want to understand the history. And one thing I would just add to that is Black Awakening in Capitalist America. If you really want to understand the true nature of this society and how it has affected Black people, and the fact that capitalism itself is inherently racist, it cannot be made unracist. And any kind of legitimate Black power and Black organizing must be against the imperatives of capitalist development. You should take a look at that book as well.
Excellent.
That's amazing. We're trying to put all of the recommendations in the chat. Professor Blackmer, did you catch them all?
I got them. I got my notepad ready. I'm gonna send out a reading list to everybody who's on the call afterwards, compiling all the recommendations from everyone.
That is amazing. Okay, I have a couple more questions for the group, and then we will open it up to everyone else's questions in the chat. For Lloyd and Nicole specifically, especially after hearing so much history from our elders this evening, what support, if any, what type of support, if any, would you like to see from our elders?
So I'm gonna let Nicole go ahead and answer that first, and then I can follow.
Okay, thank you. Honestly, what I'm learning and what I'm hearing tonight, this is it. I think that I have been blessed to have elders in my life who have been involved and I can ask them questions, but connecting me to people like Ms. Watson and Professor Simmons, like to learn more about those who are really in the trenches and doing these things that I aspire to, contribute and move forward. That's what I need from the elders. And I think that's what we need from our elders, is to just keep passing these stories down to us so that we know where we came from, but also giving us the information, right? And directing us to where we can find the information. Kind of like the question that you asked before was what I was thinking, like, where do I find more information? Because I think that's getting lost, right? The art of storytelling and like passing our stories on is being lost in my generation and then those after us. And so I would ask for that, to be honest, just to be able to partner with us and to mentor me, please. I would love to be mentored.
I'd love to mentor you.
And so I would say this. I would hope that the elders would give us the blessing of understanding that we have looked at the past. So one of the things about Black Power has been community control of the police. But this is truly a flawed political perspective. What we need to do is take all money and all resources away from the police. We need to eviscerate policing as an institution in our society. And that is something that we have learned over time, because police power has only grown in our society. It's only been through processes of crisis and legitimation. Police power has only grown to terrorize Black people further, to only criminalize Black people further. And so I think what we need to move towards now in terms of the transition from Black Power to Black Lives Matter, which I'm going to throw this in there about Black Power and Black Lives Matter, is that the truth is that Black Power was co-opted. It was co-opted. The notion of Black Power was co-opted by the middle class and the bourgeoisie, who were more than willing to carry out the will of the white capitalists. And we need to reckon with that. That's something we need to reckon with, that is that the Black middle class and the Black bourgeoisie were more than willing to accommodate the will of the white capitalists in terms of criminalizing the Black working class. And they did that through the institution of policing. And that is something that we need to come to grips with. And that community control of the policing of police is not enough. That is not enough. We actually need to reduce the influence of police power in our society. We need to reduce the influence of police power on Black working class people. That is something that we need to do. And so that is one thing that I would hope that the elders would understand and would give us their blessing for, to move forward on, because policing is a part of the project of Black subjugation in the United States of America. And there is no place for policing in our communities. There never has been, and there never will be. And so that is something that I hope that that we could get some consensus from the elders on, that we just need to do away with this institution of policing. And we can start by taking money away from that institution and putting it into housing, education, and infrastructure, the things that will actually make the Black community safe, because police have never made the Black community safe. And that's a statistical fact. That's actually based on the police's own data. All right, the UCR data, the Unified Crime Reporting data that we are all infatuated with. By their own data, it has not made us safer. And I fundamentally believe that if we are going to advance the project of Black liberation, we need to be in direct confrontation with policing as an institution in our society, because the police have always done this. They have always terrorized the most vulnerable amongst us in the Black community along the lines of race and along the lines of class. And there is no room in a liberated future for police as an institution. And I do hope that this is something that the elders, I do hope this is something that elected officials come to grips with, is that for Black liberation to be realized, for a substantive transition from Black power to Black Lives Matter, there can be no police. The police haven't done nothing but terrorize Black people since their inception. And that is something that we need to come to grips with. And so that is one thing that I hope that we can get the blessing from the elders on.
Thank you for that, Lloyd, because you also led into my final question for the group, which is, where do we go from here? Anyone can take this.
I think learning lessons from the past, and I am so grateful for the statements about the policing, because one of the reasons that the first Black mayor of Detroit got elected was because he came into that campaign demanding an end to stop robberies, enjoy safe streets, so-called stress, and the racism that was flagrant throughout the Detroit Police Department. So this was a considerable force that completely understood the police in this community were not here to support us. As a matter of fact, if you know the history of policing in America, the first police, period, were organized in order to catch runaway slaves. So that's why there's a different construct when it relates to how the police serve some communities and how they serve people of African descent. When Malice Green was murdered in Detroit by police officers on Warren and 23rd Street, when Mayor Young and myself called it murder and demanded justice, ultimately one of those police officers was convicted and sent to prison to do time, which is only the second time in the history of this country that a white police officer has been put in jail for killing a Black man. So the notion that people need to be brought on board to address justice with police is not true. They're already on board. The 67 so-called riot in Detroit was not a riot, it was a rebellion against police excessive force. There was a brother who was just having a coming home party for 2 Black Vietnam vets who were, praise God, returning home from the war. And the police showed up in a paddy wagon and arrested everybody in the clubhouse on Claremont and 12th Street, including the women, the Black women in the kitchen frying chicken and fish. Threw everybody, and one of my classmates got thrown into that paddy wagon and taken to Livernois and Elmhurst to the police precinct to be locked up. So the issues surrounding police and the lack of justice, it did not start with George Floyd, nor is it recent. It's as historic as our role in this country. And as I said, the first police force in America was convened in order to catch runaway slaves. The only sane response to enslavement is to run away. Thank you.
Guys.
So I just, if none other would like to respond, I would just like to respond a little bit to Ms. Watson. And by the way, Ms. Watson, I appreciate your service to the city of Black Detroit, I really appreciate everything that you have done. And what we know is that police power has expanded in the city of Detroit, vastly, vastly. In fact, police is the solution that they have to unemployment, housing, the despair of poverty. Police is what they send for that, and that's what they continue to send for that. And let me tell you this, I just want to echo the petition against the petition that we charge genocide,
Yeah.
that was waged in 1950 something, okay, by a coalition of progressive and Black communists. The police are the most direct manifestation of the government of the United States. And so goes the police, so goes the trajectory of this country. And the fact is that capitalism is the problem, racial capitalism, I would say. And I would say this, is that in Detroit, we have the most stark contradictions of racial capitalism. Because let's talk a little bit about Coleman Young for just a moment here, because while we all love and appreciate Coleman Young, the mythology of Coleman Young, the truth is that he had to capitulate to the will of capital in the 1980s. He sought to take taxpayer money and give that over to developers, and he criminalized Black youth during the drug crisis. This is the reality. And this is the reality that we've been living with in Detroit for a long time. And we have to confront the fact that, and I know that the state and the federal government, they abandoned Detroit in the 80s. They absolutely abandoned Detroit in the 80s. And Coleman Young was left with an impossible situation. But here's the thing, is that unemployment amongst Black people in the 1980s, that was around 13, 15%. And unemployment amongst Black youth was 50%. And the solution was policing. The solution was drug enforcement. And the solution in the 90s was policing and drug enforcement during the consent decree. That was the solution.
That was no solution.
That was no solution.
That was no solution. I voted against that, and any Black person who voted for consent to give away your own freedom, to exploit your people for the interests of the white supremacist so-called ruling class, they should have been run out of town.
Well, I'll say this.
This Black, that first, and Detroit was never bankrupt. You don't own a $60 billion asset called the water department, and be bankrupt. It was a ruse. It was exploitive. It was theft, grand theft. Grand theft is what happened during the so-called bankruptcy. And during that bankruptcy, the Detroit mayor, North City Council never even saw it. Kevin Orr, who was the emergency manager appointed by Snyder, wrote the bankruptcy. It was approved by Snyder, taken to the governor, taken to the judge, Judge Rhodes. And guess what Judge Rhodes did after the trial ended? Went to work for Kevin Orr's company, Jones Day. Went directly, the day after he retired from the court, went to work and then became an emergency manager for the Detroit Public Schools. It's straight up absolute corruption, fraud, cronyism.
Can we, Professor Simmons has had his hand up for a while. Let's let him respond, and then we will move on to audience questions too.
I want to address the issues that Brother Lloyd was talking about, the police, the defunding that, and I support the defunding of the police and community control of police. But the capitalist system is not going to allow their army to be dismantled. Now we have to be clear about what capitalist, all the different agencies within the capitalist system, each one is a police force, whether it's over education, the prisons, the housings, the economy, all of it is a police force, just that the ones on the street are the ones who are more visible and more brutal. But the whole system itself is brutal. And I know you understand that. But while we're defunding the police, we also have to begin doing something in our communities that give us a sense of security. I want to give you an example of something that used to go on in my family. My grandmother, who was a part of the Baptist Women's Auxiliary, they did conflict resolution in the community. We would get up sometime at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the whole family, and they had been called by a family that was having violent conflicts in the house. And we would go, and my grandmother would go off in the house and with the woman, and my grandfather would go off with the man and counsel him. And me and my sister, we lay down on the couch and go to sleep. But when we got up, there was peace in the house. They didn't have to call the police. Nobody was shot. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen every time, but this is something that we have to begin to develop in our community, where we can have our own relationships controlled and harmonized, because there are crises that we need outside intervention. So this has to be a parallel development of some type of internal social control, so that we can avoid as much as possible this external military force that's coming to destroy us. So we have to think about, what do we want a new society to look like? Because we have to dismantle the whole capitalist system. And we need to think, what do we want? What type of society do we want to build? Or if we're going to separate, or whatever the solution is, we still have to deconstruct the capitalist system here, because it's a danger to everybody in the world, including the Black diaspora in Africa. These people will go and invade, and we'll be in a situation like the Palestinians. You see, if we don't destroy this militaristic system that we have. But I do think we need to put that on the agenda, to continue to struggle against the police system that we have, as while we build up an internal system that is depending upon stronger families, stronger community organizations. And this is going to be a long time struggle. Thank you.
So it sounds like we need to do a separate program on policing.
Yes.
You guys are like seriously dropping so much knowledge right now, and we thank you so much for that. But we do have to move on to audience questions. The first one is going to be from Maureen Taylor, who is the state chair of Michigan Welfare Rights Organization. And I don't see her question, Peter.
It's there.
Oh, it's there.
And I'm here.
And you're here. Yes,
Yeah.
you are. Would you like me to read it, or would you just like to ask it to the group?
Well, I'll summarize it right quick, so I won't take up a whole lot of time. The historical references and the information that's been shared by all these brilliant speakers, just enlightening. And so many of these events, I remember Malice Green and standing out there looking at that painting, and so many trips down memory lane, the evilness of the police, all of these things. But this is 2022. And now that it's clear that the police will shoot you for having a scented item in the rearview mirror, and something which is not new. You get pulled over for a busted tail light, Sandra Bland, and you wouldn't put out a cigarette, and she come back dead. So we have this kind of history. But how do we translate, and how do we morph some of these energies and some of these activities and these objectives into the crises that we're having in Detroit, Highland Park, and Hamtramck right now. Councilwoman Watson was right there on top of this doggone fight around access to water. And only COVID stopped the mayor from shutting off water, and the governor had to demand that he turn it all back on. And all I want to say is some kind of way, I went and got a knee injection about 3 or 4 weeks ago so I could start running and jumping over stuff, and I'm bad now. So, all of those things that we are used to doing, we have to find a way where all those women that used to be at Parkside and Hermit Gardens and all of those places, and made certain that nobody was outside homeless. We didn't have all that. None of those tenant groups are in existence now. So how do we secure the quality of life, standard of living for communities of color who are out here now without access to housing? And I'll go back on mute. Brilliant presentations, brilliant.
Thank you, Sister Maureen Taylor. We love you and respect your welfare rights in the house. Organized. My big mama, my mother's mother, who lived on Brooklyn and Vernon Highway in downtown Detroit until that Negro removal forced my big mama and big daddy to move their house because they just tore it down along with everything else that was Black owned in that area. When you understand that people back then, my grandmother opened up her back door, and people who were homeless of all backgrounds, Black men and white men, knocked on her back. They knew they could get a bowl of soup or chicken and dump, whatever she was cooking. She would feed anybody who came to the door. We don't do that now. If somebody needed a place to stay, they could stay with somebody, whether they were related or not. We need to go back to becoming the village, rearing each other's children, supporting each other. If I've got something, you have access to it as well. Having that understanding that we are not here as individuals. We have to reject individualism and organize and treat each other like family. So I appreciate you, Sister Maureen, and everything you have done and continue to do. And people need to be reminded that everything that has happened in Detroit, everything that has been done to disempower of our assets and our power is illegal, racist, and needs to be done away with, including the military habits of the police who have no respect for the people who pay their way.
Well, if I could, just for a moment, thank you, Ms. Taylor. You know I love you. You know me. And the things that you raised, let's talk about the numbers, because the city of Detroit spends 78% more than every other city in the nation on police per capita, even though we are the largest and poorest Black city in this nation. And that should tell you something about what's going on here, because the issues that you're talking about, the housing and the water and all of those things, part of the reason that we can't deal with that as a city is because we're giving all that money to the police, straight up and down. Okay, so the police budget is on its way to 400 million in the city of Detroit. 400 million, when you have a city where a third of the people are in poverty, 50% of youth live in poverty here in the city of Detroit. And that is comparable to the conditions under the conditions in which the 67 rebellion took place. And the truth is that for poor and working class Black people in the city of Detroit, it is relatively unchanged in half a century. Relatively unchanged in half a century. And that is the truth. That is the reality that we're dealing with. And we need fundamental change. We don't need piecemeal reforms and make the police nicer. The police are here to put Black people in their place. That's what they've always been here for. And we need to take those resources and put it in things that we need in our communities.
That leads me into the next question from Dolly Jones, who asks, what do you think about the recent growth in Detroit? Does it benefit Black Detroiters? And I think she's speaking more towards the growth in downtown with businesses and such. So she directed it to Reverend Watson, but I think that Nicole could speak a little bit to this as well with her experience with business growth in Ypsilanti.
Unless the economic empowerment includes ownership by those who are the majority of Detroiters, there's no growth at all. You're just feeding capitalists and the same class that has oppressed people, Black people and poor people throughout the existence of this country and many other countries. So I do not perceive any economic growth in Detroit that is benefiting the masses of people who are paying the taxes, who are living in situations where they basically are not being represented. Or the key is to organize. We don't have to accept a second-class citizenship in a city where we are the majority. We must organize, pool our resources, own our own businesses. There was a period when I was the director of a civil rights organization in Detroit. We had 25 Black-owned gas stations in Detroit. Now we have 3. Those owners who sold out, they told me. Folks showed up at their gas stations with an attaché case filled with $100,000 in cash, offering to buy, and they sold. One after another, after another, after. I remember where those 25 Black-owned gas stations were located. I used to drive to them intentionally to get gas, to patronize them. And on my radio show, I would tell people, go to this state, don't buy from other folks, buy from your own people. But so the notion of owning and controlling our own economy, our own resources, and patronizing ourselves, doing for self, has got to be the message that's passed around, that circulates.
Well, I think what I would add to that would just be that similarly in Ypsilanti, the economic growth that we're seeing is not predominantly from African American or Black people, right? Ownership or anything. And so really, I can't say it any better than Ms. Watson just did, but what I can say is what we have been doing, a consortium of some of the Black council members on council have been coming together to put together legislation around accessory dwellings and accessory units on people's homes, where there are Black people who have businesses in their homes that technically right now are not allowed to function in those spaces. And so we're trying to create opportunities for people to be able to run their businesses out of their homes so that they can get the ball rolling. Because we see that the things that are being sought out as far as economic development here in this community are not directly impactful to the Black community. And so even though our downtown, you see the storefronts filled, that's not where you're seeing Black people. And so we're trying to make sure that we are putting our energy and our time and the revenue that we do have based upon the Black council members into the community that needs it. And so it's unfortunate that you do see growth, but it's just not impactful to us. Actually, most of the businesses that were run and owned by Black people in Ypsilanti, very similar to Detroit, were bought out, pushed out, forced out. And so we're trying to build that back up, but it's slow and steady. And also, again, the mighty dollar, who has more? It's not always us. So that's what's happening here in Ypsi as well.
Thank
So
you.
I would just say this, that gentrification is a project of Black dispossession, not a project of Black empowerment, because the imperatives of capitalism are predicated on the supremacy of white value, be that property, be that labor, be that consumerism. Everything that we are seeing in Ypsilanti, in Detroit, and even in places like Flint, that is all based around a white capitalist system. Because Detroit, look at downtown Detroit. Look at everything that's happening in Detroit. The epicenter, formerly the epicenter of Black power in the entire nation. You got a white mayor bending over backwards for white capitalists like what's his goddamn name? Gilbert and the Illich Group and all of these all smaller white developers, so that they can turn Detroit. And this is something that we need to understand, is that these are cycles of creative destruction, because Detroit has gone through these cycles in the past. They were talking about this shit in the early 1980s when they were trying to turn Detroit into the Renaissance city back then. And the thing is that capital is mobile and it's predicated on white supremacy. And so therefore, if you don't have white folks eating fancy ass food downtown, you ain't getting none of this fucking money. And that's what it comes down to. And that's what this system is built upon. And we need to not like try to find our place in it or get a fucking seat at the table. We need to burn it the fuck down and build up a system in the interest of Black and working class people. And I would say people of color and working class people more broadly. That is what we need to be focused on, because gentrification, development, that will never benefit us. That will never, ever benefit us. It is not designed to do so. And the only thing that we can do is to confront it with a militant spirit and militant action and mass mobilization. And I'll leave that there.
Thanks for that, Lloyd. This question, I have two more questions and then we will end it. So for Professor Simmons, this is from Chuck Coleman. He would like to know, can you speak about Ken Cockrell's role in the movement?
Yes, I met Ken we were both undergrad students at Wayne around 63. And I followed his work as a student and a law student, and on to community service. Ken was an extraordinary intellectual and had the ability to translate very highfalutin concepts into grassroots terminology and action. He was also a very courageous person and a creative thinker. He was bold in the law, using the law as a weapon. You know, we have an organization called the National Conference of Black Lawyers. And it's the arm, it has been the arm of the African Liberation Movement. Other attorneys like Chokwe Lumumba and of the elders like Reverend Attorney Milton Henry Gaidi. But, and these were all around the country. So you had a person he had studied under Milton Henry and some of the other elders at the time, but he had great skills and he had an understanding of politics and he studied a lot. So he was able to fight within the capitalist system, pushing it to its edges so that we could get small victories to major victories. And then we need to publicize our victories. Every time we have a small victory, we need to spread that information to show people that we can win. But psychologically, we're often beaten down so much we think that we can't win, a battle, and so we don't engage in it. But I mean, as another of the leaders from the recent period, General Baker, used to say, the victory is actually in the fight itself. And we have to understand that it's the movement and the building that's important, because we're building for you're building for yourself and your children and your children's children. I was thinking about Brother Lloyd's comment again, and I agree in essence with what he's saying about the police shifting the funding and eliminating, getting rid of the police. But it's a struggle too in mass mobilization. We have to create new ways of new methods of mass mobilization, such as a new independent political party that represents the interests of the working class and Black folks, which we tried to do in the early 60s in the Freedom Now Party movement. We were planning to run Malcolm X as in a state position here. He didn't, he declined that offer, but we were going to run the people who were on the forefront in Detroit to statewide positions. And that's something that we need to think about. How do we get young people right now, your age, Ashley and Sister Nicole, to run for the local offices? Is very important. You need to be doing what Sister JoAnn has done, and Maureen and Marion and welfare rights. But we need people both on the outside fighting, and we need people on the inside who can work together. And that's not an ideological contradiction. So I think we need to think about developing a new political party. The Democratic Party is not capable, and we know the Republican Party is not interested in making changes that help the little people. And that's one thing that exists in other countries, even other capitalist countries. Most of them have a political party that represents the interests of the working people. And so that's something that we have to do too.
Absolutely.
Giant. Ken Cockrell was a giant, as was. And Detroit has a beautiful, rich history of legal workers, legal fighters, both in politics and in the law.
Thank you, Professor Simmons. This last question is going to come from Ashanti Turman. Now, I have to tell y'all, she sent some pretty good questions in here, but because we're already 10 minutes over, I'm going to ask the last one, and I'm going to ask that everyone answer this. And I guess we could start with Reverend Watson. The question is, how do you all manage to take care of yourselves while working in your professions and being so involved with the movement? Is there a separation from working for the community and serving yourself? Is there a common ground between personal emotions and working towards further liberation that works well for you? So this is all about self-care. How do we take care of ourselves? How do we make sure to take time for ourselves outside of the very important work that that you all do?
I believe it's important to honor a spirit that's greater than us. I believe in the higher power, so I absolutely wake up praying. I pray throughout the day. I go to bed praying. I think we have to not just pray, but work as well as pray, and have an agenda that is not just about serving yourself and your family. When you take care of others, you don't have to worry about who's going to take care of you.
Thank you. Professor Simmons, would you like to take that one?
We're in a major health crisis in the Black community, and this is something we really need to make a priority. We have some very unhealthy people, and it's unhealthy. The country itself, the populations are very unhealthy. But Black people, we have some of the highest rates of prostate cancer, breast cancer in the world. And that's not true for many of our people in the diaspora. Some of them never even have those things. So we need to think about our diet. We are not eating healthy. And going back to what Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote in his book, How to Eat to Live, we've got to think about that now, and it's crucial. We've got too much of the unhealthy conditions that are shortening our lives or making our lives miserable. And much of it is preventable. So we have to take time to be in excellent health, not just fair health, but we need to be in optimal health. And so self-care is extremely important for a long distance runner in the movement. And we need long distance runners, not somebody who's just going to be around for a season, but this is a lifetime struggle. So we need to be in excellent health. You got to exercise, you got to eat properly, and you got to focus on your faith development, as Reverend JoAnn is saying, and mental health. You know, and as a people, we get embarrassed and angry if somebody says somebody needs some mental health care, some counseling. But that's something we got to deal with in our community.
Thank you, Professor Simmons. Mr. Simpson, aka Lloyd, how do you take care of yourself?
So I would just say this, is that we are all, racial capitalism preys upon our humanity. We're but men, women, and non-binary peoples trying to make our way in this world. And so, I mean, Mr. Simmons touched on some things in terms of health. We certainly need to eat well and try to take care of ourselves in that respect. But this world is always working to destroy us. That's the truth. And so how I take care of myself, you know what I do? I spend time with the daughter of Detroit, Nikia Wallace. I'm a devout parishioner of the Church of Tristan Taylor. And I want Black people to be free. So I get up every day and I fight for that, no matter how I'm feeling or whatever is ailing me. I just get up and do it. And I don't really know what drives me to do that, other than I can't stand these fools, the police, these damn capitalists, Mike Duggan, and talking out of both sides of his mouth. That's what gets me up in the morning. It's those things.
Thanks, Lloyd. Miss Brown, aka Nicole, how do you take care of yourself?
You know, I keep myself in community with people who give me good energy, first of all, and who challenge me. And that keeps me on my toes. And then I feel like I keep my stamina in that way. I strengthen my prayer life, and I also have a therapist. So I believe there's a both and there. I work in mental health and children's mental health. So I'm a strong proponent for mental health fitness. And so I practice what I preach, right? I spend time talking to someone to process all the thoughts and all the roles that I have, and all the hats that I carry. And I choose joy and I choose laughter, because some of the things that you experience in these type of roles, whether it be in my day job as a mental health clinician or my other day job as a counsel person, it can tear you apart. And so I choose joy, and I choose to see the good and see the people that I am doing the work for when I'm looking out, rather than those who are trying to detract from what we are trying to do.
Amazing. In total disclosure, I totally forgot to write my thank yous out in my script. So I'm just gonna go off the cuff. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Reverend Watson, Professor Simmons, Mr. Simpson, and Miss Brown for joining us this evening and for just giving us so much to think about. I know for me, like, my mind is just racing right now with so many personal questions to ask you guys about your work. And I really thank you for that. Thank you everyone for attending, for asking questions. Special thank you to Professor Blackmer, this was his total brainchild. We just added to it. And we thank you for bringing this to the forefront and for initiating this conversation. Professor Jones, thank you. Dr. Okafor, thank you for allowing us to have this programming. Thank you to our co-sponsor, EMU NAACP, as well as the EMU Kings. And I'm forgetting our other sponsor. I told you I should have wrote this in the script. Oh, I'm sorry, the EMU chapter of Young Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you so much for your support. This recording will go up on our YouTube page, I believe. Professor Blackmer, maybe. It'll go somewhere, and when it goes out, we'll let you guys know where it is so that you can replay it again. Yeah, that's it for me. You guys have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. I learned a lot myself. I learned so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
God bless everyone.
Thank you all for being here.
Liberation now.
Free the land. Free the land.
Yes.
My, we were blessed by some legends in the room tonight.
Wow. Shout out to Peter for having me do that off the cuff.